As we enter our final unit, we'll be studying the American Civil War and Reconstruction period. As we've seen in the previous unit, America had achieved its manifest destiny, had stretched from sea to shining sea. And yet with all that land that they had acquired, they had inherited many more problems. The issue of slavery had become a greater and greater issue as the years had gone by, and now by the 1850s it was a large moral issue for many Americans. For other Americans, like the South, it was a major political issue. Trying to keep the balance between free and slave states was the manner in which they hoped to maintain some power in Congress. And if these territories, which were going to be opened out west, should end up free or slave, mattered to most Americans. And as we're going to see in the 1850s, things start to get bad very fast. In Kansas, you have what's called Bleeding Kansas. A civil war erupts there over whether that territory will be free or slave. The violence there eventually spills out onto the floors of Congress. This cartoon of the Brooks-Sumner affair demonstrates what literally happened. A congressman beating a senator into a coma on the Senate floor while many senators stood around cheering and others tried to prevent the fight from being broken up. It's getting ugly between North and South. Events such as the Dred Scott decision further divide the country on the issue of slavery. And finally, John Brown leads his famous raid on Harper's Ferry. And all of this leads up to the election of 1860. And finally, in that election, a Republican, someone who vows to stop the spread of slavery, Abraham Lincoln, is elected. And with his election, the southern states begin to secede. First South Carolina, and soon after 10 others. And they form the Confederate States of America. So now the United States is plunged into 4.5 years of bloody warfare. And throughout the Civil War, both the North and the South, as you'll study about, have certain advantages and disadvantages, which means either side could end up winning this struggle. In fact, in the early years of the struggle, the South is actually going to seem to have the upper hand, winning many of the early major battles. And Abraham Lincoln is going to have his hands full trying to hold the Union together, to keep them from giving up and just letting the South have their independence. Ultimately, Lincoln and the Union will prevail, and the South will be defeated, which, as you will see, will eventually lead to the period of Reconstruction. Now, Lincoln had said in his second inaugural address that he wanted to rebuild the Union, in his words, with malice towards none, with charity for all. He wants to heal the nation's wounds, but, as you all know, Lincoln's not going to live to lead Reconstruction. An assassin's bullet will end his term as president, and very quickly after, radical Republicans who want vengeance on the South will seize control of Reconstruction. And so the period of Reconstruction is going to be a very trying time in the nation's history. Southerners are going to, as this cartoon demonstrates here, suffer under the burden of military occupation and rule by Yankee carpetbaggers and Southern scallywags who have gained control. Also, another group of people who are going to be challenged during this time period are the freedmen, the newly freed slaves. The 13th Amendment has ended slavery. The 14th and 15th Amendment have granted them citizenship and the right to vote. But even with all these newfound freedoms, they still have no place to go. They've left the plantation, and where do they go? How do they survive? And so the Freedmen's Bureau will come down south and try to help educate them, help get them active in politics. We'll see many African American leaders for the first time become congressmen. You'll see the plan of 40 acres and a mule kind of played out as they come up with ways to distribute land and to help African Americans get a start in life. But with all of these changes, there's going to be resistance. And we're going to see groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and others popping up to try to, in some senses, defend the rights of white Southerners who have lost their political voice, and at the same time trying to deny African Americans their voice in government, and to challenge the Yankee authorities who were controlling it. So we're going to see violence and bloodshed throughout this time period of Reconstruction. Ultimately, as you'll study about, the period of Reconstruction will come to a close. And very shortly thereafter, as white Southerners regain control of the South politically, Jim Crow laws are enacted to disenfranchise African Americans from the very rights which they had just recently been given. And so, as we end this course in American history, 1301, we leave America at a very difficult position. America is now moving forward. We've gotten past the Civil War. The nation's wounds are starting to heal, but there are some very big issues which it's going to take over a century for America to solve. And so as you enter 1302, you'll see some of these same issues that we've left America with here become big challenges right on up into the 20th century. So study well as you wrap up this final unit and get ready for that final exam. And hopefully throughout this study of American history you've kind of gotten an idea where we got our start and how our nation starts to become who we are today.